So thank you all for joining us. Today we have a very wide range of perspectives here, including from the UN and from Qatar. And we're here before the World Cup starts, just in a couple of years in the region. So wanted to give both of you the opportunity, so maybe you can start on some of the initiatives you have. I know FDI dipped a little bit quite a bit last year, but you said signs are picking up into this year. What are some of the initiatives that are drawing investment into the region from where you stand at the Ministry of Finance?
First of all, thank you very much. Thank you for being here with us. Actually, we started our journey to attract more FDI. You know, Qatar, let me just give small high introduction on that. Qatar went through three main high era. The first era was the oil and gas high era, where we developed our oil and gas sectors. We became the first country in LNG and sector. Then we went through the, let's say, the infrastructure high era, where the World Cup been announced, and we started to develop our infrastructure and utilities, and we used the World Cup as a catalyst, you know, to drive us to develop the whole infrastructure for Qatar. I believe by 2021 we will be ready to host the World Cup, and this is ahead as scheduled. The third era is we just started now, where we will focus more in the soft policies, law, regulation, and we started to reform our law, our regulation, to attract more FDI and to be more, let's say, business environment friendly. We established the IPA. I believe my colleague Sheikh Ali bin Al-Walid, he was giving an introduction about the investment promotion high agency. We have Abdullah al-Misnad, he will also speak about the free zone. We established the media city, which will attract more FDIs in the media side, and we established sports accelerators, which will also attract more FDIs in the sports sector. We're also focusing in certain sectors, such as logistics, manufacturing, financial services, and high other sectors. Also, we launched the PPP law, which will attract big firms to work with us in Qatar in public school, healthcare sectors, and this will give the foreign investors a relaxing to come and to invest in Qatar.
So you have a wide range of initiatives here, and Abdullah, I would love for you to weigh in as well here. How has the economic embargo been impacting some of these initiatives, and how are you moving forward from this?
So I mean, in terms of the specific, our ability to attract FDI, the embargo, the main limitation of the embargo obviously is the limits the land access to a market through our land border. That limits to an extent some of the logistics activities or movements that we can do, but we're focusing on all the things that we can do without a land border. So that's really been our area of focus. So within the we think of a more regional approach towards the market. We think about different products which can be shipped, mainly leveraging our airline. So and there's a wide range of goods that we're actually Qatar Airways, which is I think they're the first or second largest cargo carrier in the world, and they have direct access to over 160 destinations. And so we really leverage that as by way of the markets or the sectors that we focus on. We also look at the competitive advantages that Qatar has in manufacturing, for example, in terms of the resource availability, the feedstock availability, and most of these products have a global market. So there are certain things there's certain limitations, but we've moved way beyond them, and as of now, it hasn't been a major challenge for us. In fact, we see that any change in the status quo is a huge upside to what to the benefit of investors in Qatar. So, we see it, this is how we see it, and this is how all the investors that we're speaking with also see it. So it's more of, and everybody considers within a certain period of time, we will have land access again, and this is how most.
James, I was wondering if you could weigh in a little bit here from the UN's perspective. As Qatar tries to open up to more FDI, where do they stack up, especially in a world right now where geopolitical tensions, both in the Middle East and really everywhere are heightening? What's the demand to invest?
Well, I think first of all, it's very, very challenging. I'm talking about from global perspective. Secondly, I also see the opportunities of investing in Qatar. Now, the global context, as we have seen that global FDI declined by 13% last year. That was on top of 24% of decline in 2017. So that was a big decline, and FDI reached the kind of lowest level of the last 10 years. That's since the global financial crisis. And in terms of outward investment, we saw the decline of major developed countries' outward investment to the rest of the world, and to a certain extent, the decline of outward investment from some major emerging market investors. That has been the case. But having said that, for this year, we predict that global FDI may increase by roughly 10%. And that's kind of modest recovery, even though it may be just still below the 10-year average of FDI flows at global level, but there will be some outward investment from the major countries to the Gulf region. That's what we see it. And in fact, last year, FDI to the Gulf region increased modestly. For that, we see this year perhaps first the U.S. companies will invest more, as we saw in the second half of last year. The slowdown of the repatriation of investment earnings for the first half of last year will be the phenomena that we see that for this year they will increase outward FDI. Having said that, we also see the rising of outward investment protectionism. What do I mean by that? Meaning that quite some advanced countries trying to discourage firms to go outward or to invest less. So that's the challenge for the region, for Qatar also. But opportunities we can see, it's driven by several factors. One is the further liberalization. I think it's already said, the new investment law is putting in place, and that will further liberalize the sectors and lifting ownership and control kind of restrictions. So these are all encouraging signs. Secondly, that Qatar is now building industrial parks that will further facilitate international investment. And thirdly, I see that this kind of efforts of self-sufficiency in light of the current situation may also encourage investment into some of the sectors. So I see that market-seeking investment maybe is more on the line in the sense Qatar is high-income countries.
So James, one of the things you mentioned here is outbound versus inbound investment. We've been speaking about this on the panel just before. Abdullah, can you tell us a little bit about the philosophy and the difference behind what kind of money is going out of the country versus what kind of money you're attracting into the country?
So I think maybe it's worth noting that Qatar's, let's say, investment attraction strategy or let's say ambition is really geared towards attracting skills and diversifying the economy. It's not so much, the discussion we had where it's not so much capital seeking. So Qatar has a lot of capital. A lot of the private sector as well as the government is quite capital rich. The main driver behind the opening up of the economy is, as Saud mentioned, really to enable a greater diversification of the economy away from oil and gas. So, for example, within the free zone, we have a mandate to focus on on skills, not jobs, right? So we're looking at, when we look at target clusters, we're really trying to understand what are the skills that are relevant for this generation, for the next generation, and how do we start to build clusters around those skills. And to do that, and this is the ultimate objective of what we're doing. So to an extent, they're a bit separate streams, right? So the objectives are very different. I mean, on the outward bound, you still have a very, very healthy Qatar Investment Authority. You have lots of other agencies within the country that are very actively investing and continuing to invest within their mandate. And and on the inward bound, again, it's a different approach and a different view.
With that said, also, Saud, you had mentioned that you're actually looking into 2030. There's Vision 2030 already happening. So you already mentioned some of the sectors that you're looking for more investment. I mean, what does Qatar look like in the next 10 years?
By 2030 vision are focusing on the environment, economy, human capital, and social. So let's focus here in the economy. In the economy side, there is two main drivers, which is the economic diversification and the right utilization for our natural resources. So for the natural higher resources, I believe Qatar Petroleum and the subsidiaries company who are under Qatar Petroleum, they are doing well. But for the economic diversification here, that's where we need to put more high effort, more reforms. We just recently signed with the World Bank to do like an exercise with them, how to improve our ease of doing business rank, and how to be more friendly to the business environment. I believe we are working all together now in the country towards and to improve our business high environment.
So going back to the geopolitical landscape for a second, right now can't ignore some of the tensions in the region with the attacks in Saudi Arabia. How is that impacting your own country's geopolitical risk? What are the biggest questions you're getting from investors right now in terms of what it means for investing in Qatar?
So to an extent, Qatar's environment is different, is obviously affected with the regional geopolitical risk, but it's to an extent also a little bit different. What's happened around the region in terms of the main sources of geopolitical risk, Qatar has been a little bit isolated from that, and to an extent the blockade played a role in that as well. But also Qatar's economic makeup is also different compared to the region. Right? Qatar is, most of Qatar's key assets are in partnerships with major IOCs. So the LNG assets are very different from the oil assets in that sense. Qatar has the world's largest or the world's largest U.S. military base outside of the U.S. So it has a very large U.S. presence. It has, regionally more neutral role in the major, let's say, especially with regards to this major conflict now that's ongoing. So to an extent, we're a little bit, at least our dynamics will be different from the regional dynamics. Now, obviously we will be, every investor is thinking twice about the region and flows coming in and out. But we think that this is a short-term thing that will get resolved.
And I believe from the geopolitics point of view, it's impact all of us. It's not only about Saudi Arabia, Iran, and the other. It's impact all of us. And back to your blockade question, high as well. Qatar performed very well during the blockade and after the blockade. Now we are fine from an economy point of view, from all sectors point of view. The only matters about the blockade now is the social and the religion. That's it. There is nothing impacting us from the blockade. We always say the blockade was a blessing to us because it's ringing the bell. and we became more self-sufficient. Otherwise, we are doing, I believe, much better even before the blockade. And regarding the other geopolitics high issue, I believe it's impacting of all of us. It's not about only Saudi Arabia, and because we are all in one region.
So also, right now, we also have the Saudi Aramco IPO that everybody is planning for. It's one of the most significant capital markets events in history, really. Can you both speak a little bit to how Qatar is opening up their own capital markets? We just had Bloomberg TVA just recently had an interview with a local exchange, more IPOs being planned, for example, more family-owned businesses being opened up to new investors. Can you speak a little bit?
I know that there is 2 or 3 companies in the pipeline for the IPO. And one of them is the dairy company, which we established this company after the blockade. And this will become a flagship company for Qatar. And we are starting to export dairies as well. There is certain company, but I cannot speaking about in high now, but there is some companies on the pipeline for IPOs. Yes.
Abdullah, can you speak a little bit more to some of the more recent successes? Right, I know you won't name specific companies, but can you at least give us a sense of different investors that have been coming in and types of companies that have been building up in light of your more recent reforms?
So, I mean, with regards to the free zones themselves, just to contextualize, or just to give some context, so the free zones law came out, I think it was December 2017, January 2018. Our operation started in January 2019 in a pre-launch phase. So we're expecting to launch by the first quarter of 2020, meaning, you know, we're still in the late stages of infrastructure development, and we're expecting handover between now and the end of the year of all the key infrastructure assets that will allow investors to come in and plug and play and you know, would have some pre-built offices and all of that infrastructure. So in that context, within the last 6 to 7 months, we've had very, very good interest in investments in Qatar. Again, we do tend to have a high criteria in terms of what kind of investments we allow in, just at the investment level, not as, you know, it's not a sectoral approach, just to really look at.
What are some of those criteria?
So, for example, just looking at the value added to the economy, the environmental impact, the skills that will come in. So these are the main criteria. And within all of this context, we've already approved over $300 million worth of greenfield capital investments in Qatar, within the free zones themselves. Some of these tenants have already taken over their land. They've already started to invest and actually build their facilities. The investments have come from all over the world. We have some from Europe, the U.S., Japan. Actually, our first investor was a U.S. company. Well, the first kind of registered company was a U.S. company. They're in various sectors. So we have companies in the technology, in the high-tech space. Within the digital clusters, we have a number of technologies there. We have a number of companies in the high-tech manufacturing. We have a large number of chemical companies, logistics, and various supply chain companies, whether in aerospace or oil and gas.
So both of you have named a very wide range of industries. In the next year, is there one diversifying industry that could become the most successful in terms?
So if I could just to say, so I mean, I think if you just keep in mind that until quite late, Qatar was relatively closed off to foreign investment. So a lot of foreign companies that were servicing Qatar serviced it from the UAE. So there was a Qatari policy was always to, as part of GCC integration, was always to push foreign companies to establish in the UAE or in Bahrain or in other regional hubs to service Qatar. So there's a bit of a need to open up and allow these foreign companies to come in and across the board, right? So that's one thing, is what are the companies that we allow in the zone, and the scope is wide. but then we target specific sectors, and within the free zones themselves, logistics is a key one, mainly for the security of supply. So this is a strategic importance because of the effect of the blockade and the need to have a resilient supply chain. The manufacturing, where Qatar has a strong advantage, especially the electricity pricing and the oil and gas pricing. And what we're really driving towards is certain high-tech verticals where Qatar has an advantage, either related to the World Cup or related to its resource base.
And recently we did a study, and we found out that financial services are the most productive sector after the oil and gas. We figured out that each employee in the financial sector produced around $3.5 million every year. So so it is an interesting study we did, and I believe a financial sector will be a very promising sector for Qatar as well.
Are the U.S. banks having more conversations?
Yes, we do. I believe we have a QFC representatives here, and I believe there is some negotiation with a U.S. bank as well. We do have Citibank, I believe. We do have an office for Citibank and for the others as well.
So James, ending on one final note from you as well. You seem to be quite bullish on the future of Qatar as well. What are the one or two improvements that can be made to open them up in the most significant way to FDI?
Okay. One of the things that can be done is also targeting wider investors. In a sense, we see from the investors' perspective, the U.S. is by far the largest investors in Qatar, followed by France, by Germany, by UK, China. So that is the ranking, but the U.S. By far the largest. In the meantime, there could be investors interested in Qatar, like Japan, like Korea, like India. So these are the ones interested in doing business there. So casting the net wide for attracting investment is one of the ways to improve. Secondly, still investor servicing, and this investment facilitation is very important. I think Qatar is making tremendous progress. It can further intensify the efforts in this area. And I think for the two zones, and within the zones, how to provide the services, especially aftercare services, is very important.
All right. Well, we thank you very much for your time, and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you.